Durham Women in Tech was founded in 2014, and it's a safe space for women in all roles in tech to come and join and share some of the problems they have and some of the solutions they have as well. And we invite speakers to come in from time to time.
Tonight, the topic is learning and succeeding from failures, and I think that's a very interesting topic, one that I think a lot of people, especially successful people, don't talk about, and I think it's a very important topic.
Tonight we have Grace coming to speak to us about embracing failure.
I think that takes a lot of guts to get up in front of everyone and talk about personal things, and especially with the topic of failures. So I'm excited to hear what she has to say.
So I'm here and really excited to introduce Grace Owen. She's the founder and CEO of Savvy Growth, which is dedicated to helping leaders and their companies maximize success. Founded in 2003 as Savvy Marketing Group, her firm now offers management consulting and executive coaching services, as well as keynote speeches and communication workshops. Grace is globally recognized expert in marketing strategy and personal branding, and consults for clients from emerging growth to Fortune 1000. Grace has a passion for success and shares this desire with her clients. Her 30 years of work experience spans from consulting at Bain & Company to working inside brand leaders General Mills and Clorox to contributing to 5 technology ventures that had exits through public offering or acquisition. While at MIT, Grace was recognized as one of Glamour's top 10 college women. She earned her MBA from Harvard Business School. She has served on adjunct faculty teaching entrepreneurial marketing at UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School and at MIT Sloan School's joint venture with Fudan, Shanghai's leading university. And this is just a little drop in the giant ocean of Grace's accomplishments. And we can't wait to hear her speak. We're so happy all of you are here. I'll turn it over.
Thank you so much. The weekend before my 40th birthday, friends took me out to dinner in Palo Alto to wish me a happy birthday and coming of age. I had traveled from here to the Bay Area to take a week-long cycling trip in Sonoma. Little did they know that they'd be visiting me in the ICU just 3 days later. I had gone downhill, literally downhill. I was airlifted unconscious to a new state of mind. It was scary, my first visitor told me. I didn't even remember who he was, and he was the host of the dinner just 3 nights before. I had suffered a broken neck and a closed head injury, a brain injury, and my long-term memory had come alive, and I lost my short-term memory. I was babbling in Chinese like I did as a baby. My first words were gan gan. In Chinese, that means dry. I was telling my mom she didn't need to change my diaper. I was told that I couldn't work for many months. So I fought hard in physical therapy, occupational therapy, and cognitive therapy, and with my neuro team to get my memory back and my physical strength back. Some might view this as a failure. When you just start a company, you don't exactly tell your clients that your brain doesn't quite work. My neuropsychologist told me that I had experienced a cliff event when you almost die but don't. I was given a gift to live the second half of my life. What would I do differently? I was told that my accident could be inspiring to others. I had a lot of time on my back because I was told that I couldn't work. So I thought, what would I like to do? I thought about topics that I would like to research and write about. The first one was the correlation between those who start successful companies and those who are successful endurance athletes. A few months later, I grew intrigued by those who climb the 7 summits, the tallest mountain on each of our continents, and also start successful companies. So a couple years ago, I gave a TED Talk on this topic, and it was themed within the bucket of obstacles and entrepreneurship. I talked about those who start successful companies and also climb the 7 summits, and then added the 10 steps to reach the top in both endeavors. And this led to a series that I wrote, which then led to the foundation of the book that I'm writing. And initially, I decided to make it a business book, Project Peak, Climbing the Mountain of Entrepreneurship. In the last couple of decades, I've climbed a couple of personal mountains. I became suddenly single 19 years ago with a 14-month-old son. And then over many years, I would make many trips back to Atlanta to be by my mom's side when she was overcoming some mental health challenges. Just as she had been by my side when I grew up, I wanted to be by hers. And then just over 2 years ago, my son was getting ready to start college. And as an empty nester, and because of my genetic predisposition, I was afraid that I was going to fall into despondency. So I decided to embark on what became a year-long journey, a happiness journey. And I delved into the study of positive psychology. One of my teachers was Tal Ben-Shahar, and he's the founder of the most popular course at Harvard ever on happiness. His teaching fellow, Sean Achor, is the author of the book, The Happiness Advantage. When I was younger, I would think, just when I achieve X, then I'll be finally happy. But it's not that way at all. There's been research on those professors who are up for tenure, and the research studies find that once they do receive tenure, they have this temporary uptick in happiness, and then they go back to their set point. The same is true for those who win the lottery. You probably hear people just say in conversation, oh, yeah, only if I won the lottery could I do that. And then if you look at the happiness levels of those in the Forbes 1000 compared to average Americans, there is not a statistically significant difference. There is a difference when you look at those who don't have enough to eat, and then they're able to reach a point of subsistence. That's when there is an elevation, and it's a sustained elevation in happiness. So back to Tal's course at Harvard. When a high school senior receives their admittance to Harvard, oftentimes they think, my life is set. And I must admit that when I got my admission to Harvard Business School when I was a senior at MIT, I thought the same thing. I was quite naive. I remember opening up my letter, jumping up and down for joy, running around my floor in my dorm at MIT, hoping someone was home so I could share the good news. So the high school senior matriculates to Harvard. Their first, maybe second, third day at Harvard, they look around and they think, okay, I am no longer in the top 1% of my class. And then a day or two pass, and then they think, almost all of them think, I am definitely in the bottom 10% of my class. And many fall into despondency. In fact, in the year prior to Tal's formulating this course, 80% of the students at Harvard reported a mental health challenge. So just what is this field of positive psychology? It didn't exist when I was in school, so I couldn't have studied it when I was going through my formal schooling. In 1998, Marty Seligman was the president of the American Psychological Association. He decided to look at the numbers of research studies that were done in human maladies and compare that to the number that were done in human flourishing. And he was astounded by the ratio. It was 21 to 1. So even though you look at that and you're like, oh, that's not good, it reflected reality. The incidence of depression had greatly increased in the last 40 years. It had gone up 10 times. And the onset of depression, the age, had gone from about 30 to about the point of when a young person starts high school, about 14.5. So he said, it's high time that we flip this ratio. And he gave credence and thought leadership to the field of positive psychology. So I learned a lot, but I'm going to share with you a couple of key takeaways and then share with you more about my work with Project Peak. So one simple one, but it's not easy, especially when you're younger and trying to advance in your career, is instead of trying to impress, try to express. So allow yourself to allow people to get to know you. And then this talk topic, I was asked to really focus on failure. So one thing Tal said often in his courses is learn to fail or you will fail to learn. Never let a good crisis go to waste. So as I was studying, I decided to take what I thought was a risk and adjust my work and focus and positioning for Project Peak from a business book to one that also talked beyond business about life. So the current way I'm looking at Project Peak is climbing the mountains of life, business and beyond. And one of my colleagues, former colleagues, she told me, Grace, you're interviewing all these great entrepreneurs, and that's all good, very interesting content. But she said, you might want to share some of your own life stories. People might find it interesting. And I think at that time I was like, oh, why would anyone want to hear about my stories? But some of you know her. It was Sean. She said, Grace, why don't you try it out? So she was my PR director at 2 companies and really have trust in what she suggests. So I started to do that, and that was part of the change in positioning for Project Peak. So what I'm going to do now is share with you just a few themes of the 7 of Project Peak and focus on several examples of failure in my life. And I haven't shared some of these failures with anyone, publicly, so you guys are the first. So it's a little bit scary for me. So I hope then you are going to share, since I'm up here sharing. That's what I'm counting on. Is that an agreement? Yes. So Vicki is here. She was at OpenSite with me, my first employee and awesome employee. So you might remember this. So, or no, you weren't there yet. Yeah, because I needed you. That's why I sat there and I was like, oh, I need to hire someone brilliant. So my first week on the job, I was sitting in our meager offices with our founder, and we were briefing the leading industry analysts in our space. So this was an important meeting because what she chose to write about was critical in the growth trajectory of our company. And I listened to him as he fervently and passionately talked about what our software product enabled. And I thought to myself, I haven't been here many days, so I don't really know anything, but I'm quite sure that our product doesn't quite do that. But I decided to be respectful and continue listening and learned a lot about what our product maybe someday would do. And so great people like Vicki came, and we hired a lot of people very quickly, and our teams, we willed the founder's vision into reality. And what I've seen, and this is why it's a theme in Project Peak, is it's so important, especially if you're in technology companies that are figuring things out and really innovating, if you speak the future now, you can will it to happen. And the reason I have the other companies here is we had a successful exit to Siebel Systems, which at that time was the fastest growing software company. And then it became part of Oracle. When I was in high school, I thought the end all was to go to Harvard. So I applied, and I did not get in. And life went on. I went to MIT to please my father. Ever since I was a little girl, he would bring home engineering magazines because he wanted to encourage me to consider this very, very practical profession. So I get to MIT, and I think it was just the first week, I realized, oh my goodness, I am going to flunk out of this place. There's the most brilliant people, my roommates, one was from the Philippines and one was from Korea. The most brilliant woman from Korea and the most brilliant woman from the Philippines were my roommates, along with all these other people like them. And there was Grace, the girl from Georgia. Hey y'all, there's the girl from Atlanta. One of my friends from Long Island would say that in Love and Fun. But I felt like a fish, it was just in Love and Fun, but I did feel like a fish out of water. So I thought, what am I gonna do? I don't fit here. I had this fear of failure. So I thought, I'm gonna reapply to Harvard. I'm going to go where I wanna go, not where my dad wants me to go. I'm gonna go and major in English and become a writer. And I did have a lot of interest in that, but I think also I was trying to flee from what I was fearful of. So I submitted my application, and there was a waiting period before they would tell you what happened. And so I thought, I need to hedge my bets in case I flunk again and don't get into Harvard. Okay, where in this institute can I be a teeny bit successful? So I thought, well, maybe I can be a student leader. I'm definitely not going to be a leader in the classroom, so maybe I can do extracurriculars and be a leader. So I ran for president of my class, and much to my surprise, I was elected. And then a few weeks later, much to my surprise again, I received an admissions letter from Harvard saying they were admitting me into the sophomore class. And I thanked Harvard, but I told them no, I was going to live up to my commitment for the office that I was just elected to. So if you do not learn to fail, you will fail to learn. For many weeks, for many years, I would review the prior week and think, what did I get done well this week? What did I succeed at doing? And over the course of my journey with positive psychology, I added something. Now what I'm more focused on each week is, how many failures did I have? And if I don't have any, I get really upset. And I even get upset if I only had one. Because I realized in my happiness journey, and research shows, that it takes a lot of failures, or just common sense shows, to, if you don't have a lot of failures, that will limit your success. Okay, so now we're getting into the scary part for me. My examples of my failures. So the first day of my teaching at UNC Kenan-Flagler, I asked my class, what would you like to learn? And lesson 1, if you ask that, you need to listen and take action, otherwise don't ask it. So I asked it. I was probably copying someone else who I heard ask that, and I think I didn't really listen. I went along my merry way, and I had a certain way of teaching I wanted to bring to the UNC classroom. I wanted to bring my Harvard Business School case method, Socratic method, cold call to open, because that's how I had learned, and then it was 15 years prior. That's why I stayed up really late studying and spent hours and hours poring over my cases. I wanted to impart that upon them as well. So at the end of the semester, I get my own transcript, all the verbatims of all the student feedback. 2 stuck out at me. Number 1, Professor Owen did not share her failures. Number 2, if I wanted to go to Harvard Business School, I would have applied. So I had reams and reams of all these comments, but those are the 2 that I remember. How did I feel? I felt like a flop, a failure. All the work that I'd done, which I had put a ton of preparation into this, I had assembled these Harvard Business School cases, and many of the protagonists in the cases I invited to be guests in my class. I supplemented that with real life cases with CEOs who had come in to be my guests to impart their knowledge. I'd taken all the students off my wait list so that as many students could have all this learning. And so, but the 2 things that I remember are those. So I felt like a real failure. And then the first cold call that I did, because I wanted to teach the Socratic HBS method, I remember I carefully decided who I would cold call the night before. And I can remember now, it was to my right middle, the person I called, and it was a case on Starbucks. It was a customer service case, because Starbucks at that time in the case scenario, their lines were getting a little bit long, so those customer service complaints. So I asked this student, I wanted to scare all the students to be ready with a lot of analysis to open. And I cold called this gentleman, and I remember what he said in his opening for a lot of reasons. And one is because it was only 3 words. So when I asked him to open, he said, "Cut the menu." To which I responded, "And?" To which he responded, "I have nothing else to add." I was furious. I was expecting what I had gone through 15 years earlier. An analysis of all the 15 exhibits, regression analysis done, prioritized recommendation with 5-step action plans, again prioritized, all neatly tied up in a bow, and probably approximately a 4 to 5.5 minute discussion. Now looking back at it a decade later, his response and opening was pretty clever. And I often say to my clients, less is more. So now with only the wisdom of age, I look back at it and I realize a lot of things that I didn't do quite right. So the bigger question in my mind as I was thinking about the whole failure of my teaching at UNC is, well, why didn't I talk about my failures like this woman asked me to do? I don't know necessarily if it was that I feared failure or feared talking about these failures. I think I didn't quite realize that that would benefit them more than my cold calling to open all these cases. And so I say thank you to you all for asking me to talk about failure, because now I know through my studies and life circumstances that you do learn a lot more from your failures. So this woman, she had a really good request that at that time I was not yet wise enough to do. So the good news is that years have passed and my content has changed, my attitude has changed, my approach has changed to teaching, and I have had the opportunity to be asked to teach at other places. But I must tell you that right after my teaching at UNC, a couple of years later, I presented one of the deans a syllabus on doing business in China, and one of the deans was kind enough to take a meeting, sit there and head nod and kind of look like he was interested. But then I never heard back from him. And when I went to the professor who had invited me to teach the case that I flopped, he said, "I bet he looked at your online feedback." So I have learned, and things have improved, and people have asked me to teach, but you have to learn from things that don't go so well and be open to it. So I sat in the traffic on the Bay Bridge and was barely moving. And that's what happened on Fridays on my commute. My husband had transferred to the Bay Area from the Twin Cities, and so in order to continue my career in consumer packaged goods, I joined another company in the Bay Area. And unlike General Mills, where I had been previously, when I was working late and got hungry, and I could simply consume my product, such as popcorn, Pop Secret was my first brand, Nature Valley granola bars, or desserts, or just a lot of fun, or I could go visit my friends in Yoplait. At Clorox, I couldn't exactly ingest liquid bleach, my first big old brand, or cat litter for that matter. So at Clorox, I toiled late into evenings and weekends doing a lot of analysis, these things called MIP analyses, merchandising incentive programs, analyzing all these different trade promotions, and then doing lots and lots of analysis on seeing if my test market performance was good, so that my big brands that I was managing that were flat to declining, that maybe I could bring a little bit of lift to the brand. So after a couple of years of living in analysis land, I remember sitting in my boss's office, and we were going over my performance review. And my takeaway was, Grace, you are not analytical enough. Now, 25 years later, I realized that's maybe not what he said, but that's what I took away. And how did I feel? I was devastated. I felt like a real loser. I was embarrassed. I went to MIT. And I felt like I wasn't analytical enough. And this was very different from the culture that I'd just been in, where I worked on brands that were growing by leaps and bounds. I was doing new products. It was very different. And he said to me, I remember, and he was really right, he said, you will find yourself in a better place. And he was right, because from there, I joined my first tech startup. So several technology companies took place, including the one that was great with Vicky. And then I took a summer sabbatical with my son, which was a lot of fun. And a former boss from New York City sent me a link to an opportunity in Raleigh to be a vice president of marketing. And when I looked at the description, it seemed perfect. It really would leverage all my experiences to date. It was right here in Raleigh. And then I saw, wow, I know the person at the private equity firm that just put in money. So I reached out to him, and he made an introduction, and I got an interview pretty quickly. During the interviews, I had discussions with everyone, and then specifically the VP of sales and the VP of development took me aside, and they told me to go search on a couple of words. They said, we really want you here, but you really need to know what you're going to be getting into. So I thought, I'm strong. I can handle cultish personalities. And besides, they want and need what I bring to the table. I can help add value to this technology company. So I accepted and poured myself into understanding their situation, really understanding their customer, understanding their product. We started developing lead generation programs, analyst relations programs, built their brand such that our biggest competitors, there are two larger companies, they grew quite fearful of us. Then one day, I walked into the office and I thought, there's not many people here. And HR was at my door and she was knocking. She said, oh, can I come in? And she sat down and she told me that everyone else, save about 10 of us, were in some auditorium, and that those other of us, our services would no longer be needed. And I thought, wow, this is just what I had done just a few months earlier to the team that I had inherited. They were close to the cultish behavior, but they didn't have any requisite marketing experience. So it was hauntingly familiar what was happening to me. So how did I feel? I took it very hard and very personally. I had put a lot into this. And it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. But what did feel good, and now I can look back at it many, many years later and feel good about it, when I read about their successful exit just maybe 6 months later, or it wasn't much later, I felt good about the fact that the person, one of the VPs that I'd hired, he took my place, and then they kept all the team that I put in, and they helped grow the business and have a successful exit for the investors and for the owners. So I had another summer to take off. I didn't expect to take a summer off that quickly. And then the founder of OpenSite, he reached out to me as he was now an angel investor, and he decided to put in money to a small company that had a couple of dozen of employees. And he said, oh, if I put in money, I'd like you to consider hiring Grace. So I thought, I've taken time off. This might be the last job in the world. And hey, the investor is putting in a good word, and you'd think I would have learned a lesson at the prior company, but I didn't. So I joined rather quickly. And it wasn't enjoyable for me from the start. I had no team, I had a limited budget, and the CEO, who was a co-founder, was all over my business. And it's not that unusual for that size of a company for that to happen. But at the prior company, I think I had a little bit of exception. Vicky's nodding her head. Because that CEO was not a founder, and he was off doing deals and doing big picture vision stuff. He was very good at that, and he empowered me and our team to do our stuff. So I was just getting the reality of what I hadn't experienced before. And I really tried to like it. I really tried, but I just didn't. And a year into it, for some reason, I went in on a weekend and I decided to clean out my desk. There must have been I must have felt something coming, and maybe it was what I had learned from the year before. And so lo and behold, the very next week, two of the co-founders, the CEO and the CTO, they say, "Oh, Grace, can you come into the conference room and can we chat?" And I joined them, and it was a pretty simple conversation. They said, "Oh, they were very sorry, but things weren't working out as they had planned." And I wasn't surprised. But it still didn't feel good. I again felt like a failure. And I still took it a bit personally, but it was much easier this time. Many months later, I was at a Council for Entrepreneurship meeting. It was a very large meeting. A lot of people were there. And we counted off and broke into circles, into groups. The CTO from that company happened to be in my group. And our assignment was to talk about our failures. We all had to get in the middle and talk about our failure, and then everyone took turns. So when he got up to talk about his failure, he talked about a big hiring mistake that they had made. He basically said that they had hired this cruise ship that worked well with a crew, and they really needed a dinghy, a one-man dinghy. So I realized that it wasn't necessarily that Grace was the failure, that the hiring decision was a failure on both of our parts. So this CTO went on to become CEO of that company, and then he started another company. And he asked me to have breakfast this week. I just had breakfast with him yesterday. And I told him that I was going to be speaking with you all, and he was really happy to hear that. And he remembers clearly that time we got in the circles. And he said that people don't give enough credence to understanding failure. The importance of it is underestimated. So the year after that company exited, the one that I left, he took his family and spent a year in Spain. And he said that there, failure is not as accepted. And he observed that he thinks that innovation is stifled as a result in certain parts of Europe. So that was interesting. And then I shared with him that if they had not let me go in the prior company, that hadn't happened as well, then I would not be doing what I'm doing, which I have so much passion for. And that's helping companies and their leaders achieve their fullest potential. And that includes coaching, where I work with people to face their fears, and oftentimes it's a failure. So then he asked me, he gave me an update on what he's doing, and he's running for national office, and he asked if I would join his team. And I said yes. That's all volunteer. Yeah, that's what he's doing. He's giving back a lot, yeah. So there are two types of people in this world. Those who make things happen, and those that let things happen to them. Think about which bucket you fall in. Research shows that those that have a bias for action are the most successful. As I mentioned earlier, I've had a couple of personal mountains that I've been climbing. And the steepest one has been climbing the mountain of singleness. So last year, my first boss out of business school at General Mills, he gave me a call because he was going to be in town soon and he wanted to have breakfast. And I told Mark, I said, you know, Mark, I think I'm finally ready to address that mountain of singleness. And he said, it's about time, Grace. You've always been too busy. You've had excuses, that son Nick, building your business. You seem open. And when you're open, that's when good things, amazing things can happen. Well, my son's solution to this problem of companionship was, Mom, it's so easy. Get a dog. There's a reason there's man's best friend. And if you get a dog, I might come visit you. So he was good at bribing me. And so I really thought about it. And we had a dog over that we were thinking about adopting, but it just kind of laid there. It didn't move. And I said to Nick, I said, it's so old. It doesn't move. It can't even go running with me. And he said, oh, Mom, this is perfect for you. This is perfect. A good start. Okay, this is really good. They're great. They're great. This is a good dog for you. So I kept on studying the situation, and I called my former sister-in-law, who's a professional dog sitter, and I said, Mary, okay, tell me what I need to do. What kind of breed should I have? What do I need to do in my house? And so she went on and told me all the details. She was trying to be very helpful. And then when I hung up my phone, I thought, oh, this dog thing is so complicated, and they can't even talk to you. So I decided instead to whip out my iPhone again, and I joined Match.com instead. I think in my mind, I thought I have to have that perfect profile. And I had been on Match many years earlier when they didn't have the mobile apps, and it was more complicated then, but of course now you can join and be online and have your profile in a matter of a couple minutes. So I finally decided this past year to be bold and face my fear of dating failure. A friend of mine told me that her niece met this great guy, met the guy for her on date 30. And so I said, whoa, that's a big number. But I said, okay, if you want to be successful, you got to fail a lot. So I decided to face that fear. And actually, a lot of these dates, I learned a lot. Lynn has helped me there's friends helped me with my dating journey, and I'm so appreciative because I had fun on these. I learned a lot. Just because someone isn't right for you, it doesn't mean something's wrong with them or you. It's just like with your professional journey. It may not be the right timing in your career. There's a lot of things. It's just not the right timing. It's not the right match. So just when I was I had gone on 24 dates that didn't last, I went back to MIT for my 30th reunion. I served on reunion committee, and an old friend who I've known for 34 years, he did too. He had just lost his wife to cancer, a 6-year battle with cancer. And he has 4 kids and 2 dogs. And we've been dating ever since. So just as entrepreneurs enjoy the journey more than reaching the top, the same has been true for me. Thank you for listening to my failure stories.
Grace was incredibly brave to talk about her experiences with failure, which to the rest of us, they weren't really truly failures because she's just extraordinary.
I thought it was really great how Grace weaved her personal experiences into the themes that she was trying to get across and communicating.
It was a great experience. It was a great experience having, I think, Grace be vulnerable and talk about failures. And I thought the audience was very interactive and asked some really great questions. So I'm really glad I came.
This was a lot more personal, and it brought up failing moments for me that I feel now I can look back on and grow from.
The women that came out tonight, I thought it was important for them to hear that from someone so ahead in her career. You know, she's running her own company. She works with Fortune 500 clients. She really knows what she's talking about.
Thanks, Grace.